Begin today the Gemara on Daf Zayin, the Mishnah at the top of the Yomad. Zok Teilige Mishnah, Mi Shenigmar Dinoi Ubarach. One that was already in Bezdin, and there was a ruling that he's chayiv, and he ran away from this Bezdin. Ubal Lefnei Oisa Bezdin. They caught him, and he was brought back to the same Bezdin that already paskin is chayiv. Ein Soisrin is Dinoi. It's not necessary to go back and go over the whole din again to discuss and to see whether he's chayiv or not. They already paskined, and as soon as he comes back, they give him the chayiv misa. Kol mokem sheyam d'shnayim. Anytime two witnesses come into the bezdin v'yoimru and they testify, me'idin onu beish ploini, we testify about this individual. Shenigmar dina bebezdin shal ploini, that this bezdin already gave a ruling that he's chayiv misa. Uploini eidov, and these were the eidim. So that testimony is good to accept that this is what another bezdin paskind, and he's chayiv misa. Now, Sanhedrin, the existence of a Sanhedrin, which is the Sanhedrin of 23 that you have in every city, this is both in Eretz Yisrael and out of Eretz Yisrael as well, and this bezdin could be mechayiv misa. Now, of course, we're talking about a Sanhedrin that has proper smicha. Only they could give a chayiv misa. And also, the whole possibility of giving a chayiv misa is only when there's a Sanhedrin that's in the Beis HaMikdash and the Lishkas HaGazes. Then any other Sanhedrin of 23 can give a chayiv misa. Now, Sanhedrin ha'Ireges, echad b'shavua, a bezdin that gives a chayiv misa for once in 7 years, nikras chivlonis, is called a bezdin that is destroying, because bezdin is supposed to do whatever possible to ask questions from the Eidim that he should not come to the Chayiv Misa, as we learn out from Vitzilu Eidah. If the Bezdin is not doing this, and once in 7 years they kill someone, it's because they don't know the halachas properly. Therefore they get this title of Chivlanis. Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah Imer, Echad l'shivim shana, once in 70 years. Rabbi Tarf and Rabbi Kiva Imrim, Ilu hayinu b'Sanhedrin, if we were in the Sanhedrin, loy nerag adam yoylam, no person would ever be killed. The Gemara will explain what kind of questions they would ask that it would cause that no one would be killed. Rab Shimon ben Gamliel says, Afhein marbim sheifchei damim b'Yisrael, that they, by doing this, that no murderer can ever be killed because the witnesses are interrogated to such a degree that they cause that there should be more blood spilled amongst Yidden because there's no consequence. No one has ever given the Chayiv Misa. So Rab Shimon ben Gamliel says, yes, there is the name of Yitzilu Eidah, but on the other hand, you have to give the Chayiv Misa when it's necessary. So the Gemara, going back to the first case of the Mishnah, that this person ran away, and then he was brought back to the same Bezdin. So it says that they give him right away Misa. They don't have to go over the whole Din Torah again. So the Gemara is Medayik Lefnei Oisei Bezdin, only if he came back to or he was caught and brought back to the same Bezdin, Huday in Saisrin. Then they don't go over the whole Din Torah again. But from this you understand that if he was brought to a different bezdin, saisrin, then you do have to be saisir the first din Torah and go over everything again. But the question is, Atana Sefer, but in the next case of the Mishnah it says that kol mokem sheyam d'shnayim, anytime you have two eidim, v'yoimru me'idim manu es ish plini shenigma dina bebezdin plini eidav, that this bezdin already ruled that he's chayiv misa, and these were the eidim, harei that he's going to be killed right away. Meaning that even by another bezdin, when they come and say about this individual that he's already chayiv misa, then we don't go over the Torah again. We base on what the other bezdin already paskin, and we give him a chayiv misa. Amar Abaye answers loikasha. It's not a question. It depends where the other bezdin is. Kan be'Eretz Yisrael. Here it's when he came to Eretz Yisrael, to another bezdin in Eretz Yisrael. And kan b'chutz la'aretz. And here's when you came to another bezdin in chutz la'aretz. As the Gemara brings a brayse that explains this and explains the distinction. The Tanya, we learned in a brayse, Rabbi Yehuda ben Destoi Yemeh. Rabbi Yehuda ben Destoi said, Mishom Rab Shimon ben Shotach, in the name of Rab Shimon ben Shotach, Barach me'aretz l'chutz la'aretz. If this person that was chayiv misa, so he ran away from Eretz Yisrael to another bezdin of chutz la'aretz. And so now, when it was brought to a different bezdin of chutz la'aretz, and Adam testified that a bezdin in Eretz Yisrael already ruled about him that he's chayiv misa, ein seisrin es dinai. We're not going to go over the whole Din Torah again. There's no reason to go over the Din Torah again when he comes to another Bezdin. And this is what our Mishnah was talking about, that we're not going to be Seis to the Din. Now, however, if, however, the Edom ran away from Chutz La'aretz, not the Edom, this the Baldin, the person, the Tzeach, he ran away from the Bezdin of Chutz La'aretz, and he went to a Bezdin to Eretz Yisrael. So then, Seisrin is Dinoi. In such a case, we will be Seis to the first Din, and we'll go over the whole Din Torah again. And the reason is, Mipnei Zuchusa Shal Eretz Yisrael. When he comes now to a new Bezdin that's in Eretz Yisrael, because of the merit of now being in a Bezdin in Eretz Yisrael, it's possible that this Bezdin will find some kind of a schus for him, not to give him a chiv misa, so they have to go over the Din Torah again.
Because
that's the pshat.
Yerushalayim, you go from Bnei Brak to Yerushalayim, you have a totally different atmosphere.
Okay, yeah. Here the Gemara is talking about from Chutz La'aretz to Eretz Yisrael, not from Chutz La'aretz to Eretz Yisrael. The Eretz Yisrael gives a possibility of a new schus to be able to save him, and therefore you go over the din again. And that's what it's mashma from the beginning of the Mishnah. Okay, going to the next part of the Mishnah, it said Sanhedrin Oiheges Chulu, that the Sanhedrin, to have a bezin of 23, is in Eretz Yisrael and in Chutz La'aretz as well. Says the Gemara Mino Anamili. What is the source for this? The Tana Rabbanan. We learned in Abraisa. The pasuk says, "V'hayu eila lechem l'chukas mishpat l'dayrei seichem." The pasuk where it speaks about having the judges in every city. It says there should be a chukas mishpat for all the generations. B'chol mesh v'seichem. That's the continuation of the pasuk. In all of your dwellings. That's he's supposed to add. That's the main limit here from what it says in all your dwellings. Lamadnu. So from here we learn the Sanhedrin sheneheges ba'aretz b'chutz la'aretz, that a bezdin of 23 is both in Eretz Yisrael and in Chutz La'aretz. Now, Imkain, if so, Matam Loimar Bisharecha. So in the pasuk in the beginning of Parsha Shoftim, where it says to appoint judges, there it says Bisharecha, in your gates of your cities, which means in Eretz Yisrael. So the Gemara answers, Bisharecha, in the gates of your cities in Eretz Yisrael, Atamoishev Bateidinim, you have to have a bezdin b'chol plach u'plach in every province, u'b'chol ir v'ir, and also in every city. But b'chutz la'aretz, Atamoishev b'chol plach u'plach, you have a bezdin in every province, but v'ya Atamoishev b'chol ir v'ir. But you don't have to have a bezdin in every city. So Bisharecha in Eretz Yisrael is the gates of a city. That's the addition in Eretz Yisrael of the bezdin. Sanhedrin ha'ireges v'chulu.
Plach is bigger than here?
Yeah, Plach is a bigger area. That could be including a few cities. Sanhedrin ha'ireges v'chulu. So the Mishnah said that a Sanhedrin that kills someone once in 7 years is called a bezdin chavlanis. And of that, Rabbi Eliezer ben Azariah added once in 70 years. So the question was asked, what did Rabbi Eliezer ben Azariah mean by this? Achas l'shivim shana nikras chavlanis. Was he adding and saying that even if a bezdin killed someone once in 70 years, they're also going to be called a bezdin that's a chavlanis? Or what he meant to say is that once in 70 years, that's okay for the bezdin to kill someone. Teiku. So this remains not clear what the kavanah of Rabbi Eliezer ben Azariah was, but it's certainly he's adding more to what the Tanna Kama says once in 7 years, that is. But the question is, when he says 70 years, what did he mean by this? Rabbi from Rabbi Akiva said, if we were in the Sanhedrin, no one would ever be killed in our Sanhedrin. Why? What would they do? What would they interrogate the Edom that would cause that you can't give a chiv misa? Rabbi Yechon and Rabbi Elazar and Rabbi Elazar both said they would ask as follows: if it was someone that murdered, they would ask the Edom Re'isem Treifa Harag, Shalem Harag. Did you see whether the person that he killed was he a person that's a treifa, someone that has some kind of a defect that he can't live for 12 months? And if you kill such a person, then you're not chayiv misa because he's already a gavra ketila, he can't live. Now, some Rishonim say that this treifa that the Gemara is talking about over here is not talking about a treifa as far as any of the inner organs, because that's something that you can't see. That's not the question. The question is about externally. Did you pay attention to see if he has any kind of illness that any of his limbs that he's a treifa? And this is something that the Edom usually do not pay attention to. Or another question they would ask is, Ravashi said, even if the person that was killed was a full healthy person, they would ask, Dilma b'mokim sayif nekevava. Maybe in the place where the sword hit this person, there was some puncture already in his body, and therefore it's that puncture that was the cause of the death and not the sword. So such a kind of question is the Eidim do not pay attention to this, and therefore you don't end up giving a Chiyav Misa because they don't know what to answer. So they don't know if it's the fault of the murderer. Taisus here has a long discussion about these kinds of questions. The Gemara says here, Rabbeinu Tam asks that usually regarding such kind of questions, a treifa, or maybe there was a nekev, there's a cloud that we go after a chazaka. And the chazaka is that a person is not a treifa and a person did not have any puncture in his body. In Chulin, in Hilchas Treifis, we follow such a kind of a chazaka. So why over here are we not following this chazaka? So Rabbeinu Tam says that really we would follow the chazaka. But once we ask this question of the Eidim and they can't answer, the very fact that they can't answer is enough of reason that we don't accept their testimony. Taisus himself, though, doesn't accept this pshat of Rabbeinu Tam. He says, well, why? If you can ask such a ridiculous question, so they want to know what to answer and then you won't accept their testimony, why? Taisus says that what the Gemara here says about these kinds of questions, it's lav dafke. It's just an example of to what degree they would interrogate in order to get the Eidim to become stuck or to contradict one another, that it wouldn't end up being any Chiyav Misa. And regarding another example of an Aveda, the Gemara says, the one that had a relationship, a forbidden relationship, that's Chayav Misa. What kind of questions would Rabbi Tarf and Rabbi Kiva ask that then you would not give a Chayav Misa? So Abai and Rav both said, they asked, did you mamish see the act of them in the forbidden relationship, literally, physically, clearly? Now, only then could you be Mechayiv Misa. And Eidim usually do not pay attention to see to that degree, and therefore you don't end up giving a Chayiv Misa. The Rabbanan in the Mishnah, the others that would give a Chayiv Misa, and they would not ask these kinds of questions, so Heichi Daini, how would they judge? How would they? What kind of questions would they ask and interrogate to be sure that the Eidim saw that there was actually a forbidden relationship? Kishmul, they would ask like Shmuel. Dama Shmuel says, Bimenafim, when it comes those that there's a forbidden relationship, Mishayiru Kimenafim. As long as we see in their closeness, that the way they're lying, that there's a act of a relation between them, you don't have to physically see mamish, and it's enough to give them the Chiyav Misa. Hadron Allah, Keitzad Eidim. We shall return to you the first Perek of Masechta Makos. So we begin the second Perek of Masechta Makos that will discuss the halachis of one that killed b'sheigeg inadvertently, that then has to go into an exile, into Galus, into the Ir Miklat. The Gemara will discuss all the details of this halacha. The following are the ones that if they kill in this kind of way, they have to be in exile, in Galus. Ha'heirig nefesh b'shkaga, one that kills someone b'shkaga. Now, b'sheigeg means that it happened by mistake, but it's something that has some level of negligence involved. If it doesn't have any level of negligence involved at all, that's what's called an einus, and then you potter from galus. On the other hand, if it's a kind of sheigig where there's a high level of negligence involved, a big pshia, that's not called a sheigig either. That's already closer to a mezid, as the Gemara will say. But over here we're talking about a sheigig, and the Gemara will bring different psukim that will give a lot of limitations exactly what this sheigig is, and it's actually this sheigig here is more limited than the concept of shegig the way it is by Karban Chatas and in other cases. Now, so the Mishnah here brings a halacha that with three examples of one of the limitations of when you're chayiv to go into galus. Hoya ma'agel b'magila. When one is using this tool that's called a magila. So as Rashi describes, this magila is for the roofs in those times that there were flat roofs basically, and they had plaster, but in order to have the rain drip off the roof and not say sitting on the roof, so they would plaster the roof with some kind of an incline so that the rain will roll off. Okay, so now this magila was some kind of a wooden tool that had a heavy wooden tool with a flat bottom that they would flatten out the roof and on this incline to make as I mentioned, for the rain. Okay, so now ma'agel, the magila means that there's the downward motion when you're going on this incline down. That's ma'agel, and then there's moishech, when you're pulling back up this tool, the upward motion back up towards you. So now, if he's ma'agel b'magila, if when he's going in the downward motion, and then v'nafla ala, it fell out of his hands, and v'argasai, and it killed someone, or hoya mishal shul b'chavis, a person is rolling down a barrel, he's letting down a barrel with rope, and on its way down v'nafla alav, and it broke on this individual there on the bottom and it killed him. Or a third case, Hoya Yored Besulam, person is coming down the ladder, V'nafal Olav, and the person falls off the ladder, V'hargasai, or the other gersa here is V'hargai, and he killed the person, fell on him. In all these cases, Hareza Gaila. This person goes into Galus, and this is the rule that the Mishnah Gemara will bring the source for this, that the shaygig that one is chayiv to go into Galus for is only if it's derech yiride, if what happened was in a downward motion. But if it's an upward motion, then now the Mishnah says, but in a case where the person was pulling this magila now towards him, going upward in that incline, and and it fell out of his hands and killed someone, or he was with a rope, he was pulling up a barrel, and on its way up, and it snapped, and it killed a person, or the person is going up on the ladder, and it fell on a person and killed him. In such a case, you don't go into galus. Here's the rule about this. If it's in a downward motion, then the one that caused this inadvertently goes into galus. But if it's not in a downward motion, but it's an upward motion, then there's no galus.
He just walks off free.
Correct.
But
Yeah.
is it chayiv?
No, he's not chayiv galus.
So I'm never chayiv anything else?
No. Okay, the Gemara here brings the pasuk. Let's see. No, and Emili. From where do I know this distinction? Amar Shmuel. So Shmuel says the Amar Kra. The pasuk says Vayapel Olav. That the pasuk where it speaks about one that kills b'shaygig, and it says that he didn't see him. Vayapel Olav Vayamos and V'ulay Oyev le'mvakish rasai. So it uses the term Vayapel Olav, and the means Achi Yipol Derech Tefila. That is, if it happened and he fell down on him in a downward motion, that's when the person is chayiv to go into galus. But if it's going up in an upward motion, then you're not chayiv galus. There's a famous Rambam about this, simply in the Gemara. It sounds like that this is Exeris HaKosav. It's just the language of Vayapel. That's the distinction, but there's no explanation for the difference. But the Rambam says that in a downward motion, that's something where there's more of a negligence involved. When a person is going down, he has to be more careful to hold it tight that it shouldn't slip out of his hands. But in an upward motion over there, when it slips out of his hands, there it's more of an einus. It's closer to an einus when that happens, and therefore over there he'll be potter. That's the rationale behind this distinction. Tana Rabbanan and a brayso we learned. So here the Gemara is going to darshan many different psukim that it says regarding one that's chayav and galus. So the pasuk says bishgaga, that he killed and it was only b'shaygig. So what does it teach? Prat lemezid, that excludes someone that killed b'mezid, and intentionally, deliberately. Bevli das, another pasuk it says that he killed and it was without his awareness. Beprat lemiskaven, this comes to exclude one that did it intentionally. So the Gemara asks, why is it necessary to have these rashos? Now, mezid, this that we say that it excludes someone that killed deliberately, pshita. Obviously, he's not going to galus. Bar katalahu. If he kills b'mezid, we know that this is a ritzech that's chayav misa. Omar Rave, so Rav explains, or Omar Rabbe, Eime prat lo eime mutter. What it really means to say when it says prat lo mezid is one that thought that this is mutter. He says he thought that it's allowed to kill someone. And that's the case that it's saying that he's going to be potter from galus. Amalei Abaye, so Abaye asks on this pshat, I eime mutter? A person that thought that it's allowed? Honestly. So if that's the case, so then this is something which is a ninus, meaning he didn't even realize that he's doing anything wrong. Amalei, so Rabba answers, no, Shani Aimer, it's my opinion that Aimer mutter karev lemezidu, that one that says regarding such a thing, ritziche, that it's allowed, he's actually closer to being a mezid, because this is a kind of thing that the person should have known that it's aser. And when someone thinks and says that, I thought this is allowed, that's closer to a mezid than being saying that it's closer to an einus. So as you see here, both Abaye and Rava agree that this case of Ayma Mutter will be Potter. But they're arguing the reason. Abaye says the reason is because he's closer to an Einus, and Rava says the opposite, that he's actually closer to a Mezid. The Nafkaminim of Farshim say is regarding a halacha that we'll learn later in this Pedic, the halacha of a relative that's a Goyal Hadam. A relative may take revenge and kill this person that killed B'shaygig. That does not apply in a case of an Einus. Then there's no din of a Goyal Adam that may take revenge. But if it's Karev Lemezid, then there is a din of a Goyal Adam that he may take revenge and kill him. Okay, so Gemara weiter. Now regarding the other limud that it said, Bevli das, that it was without his awareness. And it said, Prat miskaven. It's coming to exclude one that did it intentionally. In fact, the Gemara miskaven, if he's doing it intentionally, pshita, again, it's obvious that he would be potter because bar katolu, he's chayiv misa. This is amazing. Rabbi explains what it means is Prat miskaven laragas a behemeh v'haragas adam. It's speaking about someone that intended to kill an animal and he was hunting, let's say, and instead he killed a person. Lakuti, he wanted to kill a kuti, which is not necessarily a yid. You're not chayiv misa for killing a kuti, and v'haragas Yisrael, and instead he killed a yid. Or lenefel, he intended to kill a nefel, not a viable child, v'harag ben kayama, and he killed a child, someone that is a viable person that you would be chayiv misa if you intended to kill him. So in these cases, because he wasn't mechaven to kill a Yisrael, a bar kayama, he's not chayiv misa. So you think that in this case maybe he's not chayiv misa, but maybe he should be chayiv golus. That's why it says there, b'vli das, that prat miskaven, that in this case he's also going to be potter from golus. Tana Rabbanon, and another brayse we learned explaining other psukim that it says in bepesa. So the pasuk actually says in bepesa, suddenly beloy without hatred, hadafa, he pushed someone, a hishluch olav called kli beloy tztia, he threw on him a something and a tool without aiming, and then he'll be chayav golus. So the Gemara darshans the whole pasuk. In bepesa, when it says suddenly, what does this mean? Prat lekenesavis. This comes to exclude the case where this happened by a corner. So according to Rashi, what happened over here is the hayrig, the person that killed someone, is walking with a knife sticking out, and he's coming towards the corner. And the victim that got killed, is coming from the other corner. Naturally, in such a case, when someone comes with a knife, so it's sticking out, the victim that's coming from the other corner is able to see in advance that there's a knife that's coming here, that he should be careful. Whereas the hayrig, that's coming with the knife, does not see the victim that's coming from the other side of the corner. So in such a case, the victim is to be blamed for not being more careful, not that he didn't realize this, and therefore the hayrig is not in the category of a shaygig that goes into galus in this case. That's the miyut of bepesa. Beloy it wasn't with hatred. Prat l'saina, that excludes a case where it's a saina, so then we know that it was deliberate and it's no galus. Hadafai, he pushed him, which means shadachafai begufai, he pushed him with his body, and it was done unintentionally, and it's a shegig, and he's chayav galus. Oy hishlech olav, he threw on him. So what do we learn from this, that it says threw on him? Lohavi, this comes to add and say, yiride, when one was doing this in a downward motion, but shehi tzayrech aliyah. But the downward motion was for the purpose in order to go up. So Rashi explains, when a person wants to lift up his hand with a lot of kayach, and he has an axe in his hand, so what do? First you'll lower down your hand, and then you're able to pick it up with more kayach. Okay, so when he lowered it down, that's when he ended up killing someone. But he lowered it down only for the purpose to lift it up again. So you may think that this is not in the category of derech yiride, in a downward motion, because it's all for the purpose of going up. That's why it's saying, no, hishlich, which means throw down, it includes, it's an extra pasuk to say that even this is also chayiv golus. Beloitz dia, he didn't aim for this, which means prat lemiskaven letzad zeh. He had an intention to throw to one side, and v'hochalo letzad acher, and it flew to a different side. So this is also a case where he's not chayiv golus. Now there's another pasuk where it says va'asher lo yitzada. He did not aim. What does this mean? Prat lemiskaven lizrik shtayim. This excludes a case where a person intended to throw only 2 ames, v'zorak arba, and it flew and it went, he threw it 4 ames. Not the amount that he wanted to throw, or similar, Rashi says 4 and it went 8. Another pasuk where it says Vashiyavai esri'eyu bayar, that he came with his friend into a forest. And then there the pasuk goes on to say that he was chopping wood, and the piece flew out and it killed someone. So why does it specifically describe that this is in a forest? Because ma yar rishos lenizik ulamazik lekonisham l'sham. A forest is a place where both the nizik, the victim that got killed, and the mazik, the one that damaged and killed, they both have permission to enter there. Avkol rishos lenizik ulamazik lekonisham. The whole halacha of chiyuv galus is only in a place where both are allowed to enter. But if it's in the private rishos of the mazik, and someone came in over there and into his private rishus, and he killed him there inadvertently, b'sheigig, he's not going to be chayiv galus. What happens in a case where a person is going up a ladder? Now one of the rungs in the ladder slipped out from below him, from the pressure. v'nafla, and that rung fell down, v'harga, and it killed someone below. Mahu, what's going to be a halacha in this case? Ki hai gavne aliyehi, do I consider this to be something that's derech aliyeh? Why? Because the person that's causing this ladder the rung of the ladder to be pushed out of its place and killed someone, he was going up. So the act that he did that caused this, he was in upward motion. So that's not included in the case that's chayav galus. Or no, it is considered to be derech yirida because the actual rung of the ladder was being pushed down, and it was through it being pushed down that's what caused it to snap and to fall down on someone. So it is considered to be derech yirida. Amalei, so Rabbi Yechanan answers, Kvar nagata biyiride shehi tzarech aliyah. This question is similar to what it said before in the Braisa, that in a case where there's a yiride, even though it's tzarech aliyah, it's for the purpose, he's lowering down the axe, but for the purpose of picking it up later with more force, but because it was in a downward motion, it's going to be chayiv. In this case as well, Rabbi Yechanan says it is considered to be similar to that case, even though the act that the person is doing is going up. His intention is just to go up. He's not coming down now. But nevertheless, because when he pushes the rung, it's in a downward motion, therefore it was going down, and that's how it snapped. You will be chayiv galus for this. So Eisvei, the Gemara asks him what Rabbi Yechanan said. What did it say in our Mishnah? After it gave the cases of derech yiride and then derech aliyah, the Mishnah concludes and says, there's a rule. If it's in a downward motion, then there's galus. If it's not in a downward motion, ain't a gaila. You don't go into galus. So what do we learn? Why is the Mishnah adding this klal? When the Mishnah says that if it's not in a downward motion, there's no galus. Why is it saying this? What do we add with this klal that the Mishnah says? So lav, don't you think it's coming to add this kind of case that even though the actual rung in the ladder was being pushed down and it snapped, but nevertheless the person was going up, and therefore this is called derech aliyah or not derech yirida, and therefore you'd be potter. That's what it's adding. So the Gemara says, but according to your reasoning, that this part of the Mishnah has to come to add something. How about the first part of the klal? Kol shu b'derech yiridasei. When the Mishnah says the klal, anytime it's derech yirida, la suyei mai. What's this klal? That if it's derech yirida, you will be chayav galus. What is that coming to add? So you have to explain this as well. So the Gemara explains, so there's no question on Rabbi Yechanan here. Ella, I'll tell you as follows. La suye katzev. The case, when it says in the beginning of the Mishnah that derech yirida always going to be chayiv, is a case of a butcher that's cutting meat. As the Gemara is soon going to describe, what is this case that is coming to be added over here in the Mishnah. So hachanami, so too when it says that if it's not derech yirida, that he's going to be potter from galus, it's also la suye katzev. It's talking about this case of the butcher. And here the Gemara will bring a few braises that discusses the case of a butcher that's cutting meat, and there's different motions, different parts of the motion of how he is swinging with the knife to cut the meat, and whether he would be chayiv or not. Now, the Tanya, we learned in a braise, katzev shahoyim mekatzev, a butcher that's cutting the meat. Okay, so now before we see the braises here that the Gemara brings, when a butcher cuts the meat, what happens? He lifts up the knife. He starts off with first going down. He first goes down in order to lift up the knife with a stronger force. So he first has to go down. He lowers down the knife on the table. Then he comes back up. Then he goes all the way up to his back. And then there from the back, he's going down. And then he comes back up again. And then he comes back down again to cut the meat that's in front of him. That's how he gets the power in order to be able to cut the meat. So there's a motion, downward motion in the front of him, an upward motion, and then same thing in the back. There's the downward motion, upward motion, and then when he comes back up and coming down. So those are the different stages of this.
You read it circally up on mine.
Okay, so let's see. So the Mishnah here, or the Gemara rather, brings different braises that describe what the halacha is regarding the cutting of the meat. Now, Tanichade, in one braise it says, Lofanov chayiv, when he was cutting the meat with the knife and it's in front of him, and he killed someone, Hoch bichayiv galus, or la'achrav pater. But if it's behind him, he's pater. V'tanya edach, in another braise it says, la'achrav chayiv, that if it's behind him, then he's going to be chayiv, Lofanov pater. That if it's in front of him, then he's going to be pater. The exact opposite. Now, V'tanya edach, in the third braise it says, Bein Lofanov, bein la'achrav, whether it was in front of him, whether it was behind him, chayiv. In both cases, he's going to be chayiv. And v'tanya yidach, yet in the fourth brayse we learned, bein lefanov, whether it's in front of him, bein la'achrav, whether it's behind him, potter. He's always going to be potter. So we have different brayses here explaining fi halacha regarding the cutting of the meat, derech yiride, derech aliyah, what's going on over here? So the answer is v'loy kasheh. There's no question here. The point that the Gemara is going to basically say is, whenever it's an actual downward motion, you're going to be chayiv. Even if that downward motion is for the purpose of aliyah, it doesn't matter. If right now it's in a downward motion, you're chayiv. If it's in an upward motion, even if it's for the purpose of a yirida, it doesn't matter. As long as it's now in an upward motion, you're going to be potter. So therefore, the first brayse kan be yirida shalafonov. And the first brayse where it says that lefonov, he's going to be chayiv, that's when he's bringing it down in front of him. And va'aliyah shala'achrov. And the aliyah means after, the knife is still in front of him. He's coming down with the knife in front of him, then he's going to be chayiv. Even though he's only bringing his knife down in order to lift it back up with force, but now he's going down, so he's going to be chayiv. Va'aliyah shala'achrov means right after he brings the knife down, he lifts his hand up, even though his hand is still in front of his body, but the brayse here calls that aliyah shala'achrov because he's going up in order to go back behind him. So that's the aliyah, he's in an upward motion. And then he's going to be potter. The next brayse that says the opposite, kan, over here, the brayse is speaking about ba'aliyah shalafonov, when he's in the upward motion that's in front of him. So he's going up in front, and the yiride shala'achrov, and the yiride in the back, meaning that in the back he's going down in the back. So then he's going to be potter. Rashi explains this. Again?
The Yirida Shalachrav, he's potter?
Yeah, Yirida Shalachrav, again. Kan be'aliyah shalafonov, no, Yirida Shalachrav, what did it say in the second brayse? That la'achrav, in the Vitanya Idach, in the second brayse it says la'achrav is going to be chayiv, and lefonov is going to be potter. Right, so in the second brayse, what is it talking about? Kam ba'aliyah shalafonov. The lefonov that it says in the brayse that he's going to be potter. That's because, again, a second. See, get the lashon of the brayse before the second brayse, right? What did the second brayse say? Lefonov, he's potter, right? So the reason why lefonov is potter is because it's aliyah shalafonov. He's going up. Lefanov, therefore he's potter. And the yiride shala'achrov. When it says la'achrov is chayiv in the second brayse, that's because it's a yiride in la'achrov. Okay, now then kan, in the third brayse, where it says in both cases that he's going to be chayiv, be yiride shalafonov v'shalachrov, that he's on his way down, behind him, he's going down, and also in front of him, he's in a downward motion. And kan, in the brayse where it says that in both cases he's going to be a potter, that's ba'aliyah shalafonov, when he's already picking it back up in front of him, and v'shalachrov, and in the back also, after he went far back, then he's coming back up, on the way back up, and behind him he's going to be potter in both cases. So over here, what we see from this brayse is that whenever it's a upward motion, you're going to always be potter, even if it's for the purpose of coming down, and whenever it's in a downward motion, you're going to be chayiv, even if it's for the purpose of going up. And that's the Zeh Klal in the Mishnah. It's coming to add that b'derech yirida, you're always going to be chayiv, and if it's not b'derech yirida, you're always going to be potter. Okay, now the Gemara brings, regarding this shaila of a person that's going up a ladder, and the rung of the ladder snapped out. So here the Gemara brings that it seems like that this is already addressed in a brayse. So Lema shall we say, Kitanoi, this statement that Rabavo said, or Rabavo asked about this, and it seems like it's a machlekes tanoim. Because the brayse says someone's climbing up a ladder, and the rung of the ladder snapped from below him, from the pressure. Tani Chodem, one brayse it says chayiv. Then in this case he's chayiv because the pressure on the rung on the ladder is going down, and that's what causes it to snap, and therefore it's in a downward motion. But the Tanya Yidach, in another brayse it says potter, that in such a case you're going to be potter. Why? Because the person is going up, so it's considered to be derech aliyah. Says the Gemara Ma'ila B'Haka Miflagi, aren't they arguing about this point that we're discussing here? The Mar Savar Yiridihi, that the first brayse holds that this is considered to be Yiridi. You look at the actual pressure in the rung of the ladder itself, it was in a downward motion. But Umar Savar Lihi, but the other brayse says no, but the act that the person is doing, he's going up, and therefore this is considered to be Derech Aliyah. Says the Gemara, loy. That's not the explanation of these two brises. The kula alme alihi. I can tell you that everybody would say that this is considered to be derech aliyah because that's what the person is doing. He's going up. But v'loy kashya. There's no question here on these two brises. Kan lini zokin. The brisa that says it's chayiv, that's talking about when he caused the damage, when he harmed someone. There, by a nezek, a person is chayiv, whether derech yirida, derech aliyah, doesn't make a difference. Over there, you learn out from petza, tachas, potza, as Rashi here brings, that you're chayiv for a shegig, a mezid, a oynis, a ratzin, adam muad lo'olam. That's the halacha by damages. Kan legolus. And here, the brisa that says you potter is because it's when he killed someone b'shegig, that's for golus, and it's considered to be derech aliyah. Ibai Seime, or another way how to explain these two brises, hava ha legolus. Both brises are talking about when one got killed, and the question is whether he has to go into Golus. For Loikashi, there's no contradiction here. Ha da asliya. Here where it says that he's chayiv, it's because this rung of the ladder that he was in was already getting rotten. And therefore, when you step on it, it bends and then it snaps. It goes through in a very strong downward motion. And therefore, in such a case, it's derech yirida. And I'll be chayiv. Ha da lo asliya. But in a case where the rung of the ladder was good, in good shape, good quality, in such a case, it's the rung of the ladder doesn't really snap down in that kind of a way, and we look at the person that's going up the ladder, and therefore it's derech aliyah. Or another option, similar, we can explain, hava ha de lo yasliya. Both of the brises are talking about the rung in the ladder, which is not wormy, or it's not getting rotten, it's in good condition. But v'loi kasha, there's no contradiction here because the mahadik. In a case where this rung in the ladder was tightly in, good, nice and well, so it doesn't move, it doesn't budge, the rung in the ladder, so it's not really going derech yirida, and therefore you'll be potter. And the loy mahadik. But in a case where it's not tightly, it's not tied in, so when you step on it, there's a yirida, it pushes it down, it's not well in position. In such a case, it's derech yirida, and therefore you will be chayiv.